My name is Mariana Wright. I work in English Language Arts curriculum grades 3 through 5. I've been at the Classical Academy for 8 years now. 6 have been in curriculum. I actually taught 4th grade down the hallway when I first started. So I'm happy to be here and share this new curriculum with you. Yesterday we had a really great guest who shared some wonderful sentiments about the program, and I'm going to try to echo what she said a little bit with you and just share that this program is complex and it is a struggle, and if you haven't had linguistics in the past or learned a language, which most of us haven't, then a lot of this information is new for you. So this is a situation where you're not necessarily cheering your student on from the sideline, but you're actually rowing the boat with your student, learning alongside them, and but there's such a great opportunity in that to show your students that growth mindset and what we call a productive struggle in education. We're pushing through. If you don't know something, you're modeling for your student. Where can we find that information? How can we find that online? Let's look that up. I don't know about that. But really just keeping one page ahead of your student is enough if you're not feeling confident. You know, just read ahead. You're learning alongside your student and just accept that and kind of relax, because that's what a lot of parents are doing right now. And even me encountering this curriculum. And what's so great about this is, for me, it is different than what you learned growing up. For me, when I was learning spelling, I felt like my confidence was always undermined by the exceptions to the rules. So if you would learn something like I before E except after C, except in neighbor and way, and I think exception even is one of the examples. But there's a lot of examples of different words that do not fit into the normal spelling rules. And for me, that always made me feel like I didn't know what was happening at any given moment. I mean, obviously I was still successful, and I was an English major, so the spelling didn't inhibit my learning too much. But how amazing is it that we're teaching our students with this program that explains 98% of the English language? So the premise behind this program is that your student is learning 74 phonograms, those are the sounds related to symbol cards, and 31 spelling rules that explain 98% of the English language. So for me as a parent who's going to be teaching this next year, I get excited just to, I've been learning as I've been going through this program, but to learn that alongside my daughter as well when she gets started, because it's so much richer than the way I learned. So we're hoping that you are excited about it, even though it's a little tricky to get started here. And our goal for today is to give you a little more information about the whys. Why did we choose this program? What is the research behind it that makes it so valuable and successful with students? And then take you through a tour of the components of the program to give you a little more confidence navigating and see how all these pieces fit together, and then to have you take away some helpful tips with you for organization and just implementing some kind of routine. So we're going to get started with a video. Like this. So this is Denise Ide. She's the creator of the program, and she's going to share some research behind how we read and why this program is different than other programs.
The 5 strands of reading comes from the research done by the National Reading Panel. So in 1997, Congress appointed the National Reading Panel to review reading research and determine the most effective methods for teaching. The National Reading Panel reviewed 100,000 studies. So the reason I want you to understand this number is this. You can go and Google reading studies and pull up a study that says anything. And you are going to encounter people who have a particular study that they love because it proves their point. But science doesn't work like that. Science has a hypothesis that is put forward and then proved over time and over numerous replicatable studies. So the National Reading Panel's goal was to review the major body of reading research and literature, which is impossible for an individual to do because there are so many studies about how to teach reading. okay? And so they reviewed 100,000 studies, and in the year 2000, they submitted their final report. If anyone wants to look at it, it's right here. I printed it off for you, okay? So this is available for you. You can take it to your hotel room. You can read it if you would like. But I'm going to tell you the summary of their report, and many of you will have seen this. It is all over our curriculum today. Their summary is that there are 5 essential components to teaching reading. Those are phonemic awareness, systematic phonics, fluency, vocabulary development, and reading comprehension. So after a literature review of all these studies, they found these are the 5 necessary pieces to teach students to develop reading. But this leaves a lot of questions, doesn't it? Because which one goes first? Fluency? The study doesn't tell us this. Phonemic awareness? Comprehension? I have sat in on reading trainings where fluency was the first skill. I've also sat in on reading trainings where comprehension was the first skill. So we still have questions. So which order should they be introduced, and how should each skill be taught? I want to give you some analogies to think about reading instruction, because reading is a huge topic, as you were discovering. And the first one is this. Teaching a student to read is like building a building. And the very first thing you need to do is to lay a foundation. Because if you don't lay the foundation, what happens? The building is unstable and it falls down. And that foundation is phonemic awareness. Now, we are going to go through each of these topics with brief definitions, and as the training goes on, we are going to dig into each topic in depth. So this is the inch deep. We are going to go a mile deep with each topic as well. So phonemic awareness is very simply the understanding that words are comprised of individual sounds. On top of this, we have fluency. And fluency, in this context, is the mastery of the skill of phonemic awareness to the point of automaticity. And once again, we will go deep with this, so if that doesn't make sense to you, very shortly, I will help you understand this and you will experience it. On top of that, we place systematic phonics, which is an accurate written code which translates sounds into a visual image. And phonics also has a component of fluency, mastery of the skills of systematic phonics to the point of automaticity. On top of this, we put on vocabulary development, which is learning the meaning of new words and morphemes through direct and indirect instruction, and developing tools to discover the meaning of an unknown word. We will then add comprehension skills. And comprehension skills are strategies a reader may employ to better comprehend a text. What you're going to discover is that this is the foundation not just of reading, this is the foundation of our entire education. Because every subject is really dependent upon if you can read or not. And our mastery of these subjects depends on us developing a strong foundation in literacy skills at the beginning. So if I build a foundation like this, what sort of building can I build on this? 2 or 3 story house. But if I build a foundation like this, what could I build on it? A skyscraper. And it's wonderful that we're here in Rochester, Minnesota today, because all around us at the Kaler here is the Mayo Clinic. And one of the buildings is, I think it's the Gonda building that they built this way, where they built the foundation much deeper than they needed to because they planned to add stories in the future. Now, thinking about building reading as building a house and laying the bricks of a foundation is actually oversimplified. I think it is helpful because you're going to see and experience throughout this training how those skills really do build upon each other. but it's not quite as simple as building one at a time. I think it is much more helpful to think about this as if it's an organic process. So it's like planting a seed and growing a tree. And when this tree grows, it is much more complicated than bricklaying. But what I also want to point out about our tree is this. When we think about reading, we often think, look at those books. I can't wait for my students to go and open those books, to read them, to enjoy them, to comprehend them. But we forget something, don't we? We forget that down here in the ground are roots supplying the whole tree. And you'll notice these roots have words and skills on them. And then there's the paths within the tree that carry the nutrients from the soil up into those branches. So this picture from the University of Minnesota agricultural site I think is really helpful because it reminds us that a healthy tree has roots that are much bigger than what we see on the top of the tree. And in the same way, those foundational skills for reading need to be dug deep. They need to be grown broadly. They need to be fostered so that tree is healthy. If you restrict the growth of the roots, you restrict the health and growth of the tree. So here's another way to look at it. Here are how some of these skills are organized into foundational or root skills. And you'll notice I put fluency in the trunk because fluency is really conveying those skills so that you get up to these other skills that we see. We see these parts more visibly when we think of students reading. Now, I want you to watch this little video of a seed growing, and I want you to tell me, what do you notice? The roots grow first. But then, what else is growing? The stem. But do the roots stop? No. And that is something really key for us to understand about reading instruction. We do need to lay some root skills first, but we don't stop just because the stem starts growing. We keep fostering the growth of those roots because they need to keep growing in depth so that the tree can grow up large and strong. Now, sadly, a lot of schools are building, and a lot of people are building reading like this, really, really ad hoc, right? And then they build their entire education and they wonder, why does it crumble? The students start to crumble because they have this chaotic foundation. It wasn't laid in any way that makes sense. And it was unstable. So the 5 strands of reading are this foundation that lead to reading and comprehension. And like I said, we're going to dig into each of them. Now, I like to talk about these 5 strands of reading as the critical thinking skills for language learning. These are not rote skills. This is not about rote memorization. This is about critical thinking tools that students can learn to develop strong language skills in their first language. And when they have these skills, they can apply them to learning second and third and fourth languages, because this is how to think and learn about language. Now, I would suggest for your homework tonight that you check out the white paper on our website. And I put the URL in your homework, and this will give you a very, very brief research introduction to the 5 strands of reading and how they fit together with logic of English. Because understanding that research and understanding those components is vital to being able to teach this well, I think, in an academic context.
So as you might already know, this is a comprehensive curriculum that covers spelling, grammar, vocabulary, cursive writing, and some reading skills as well with the Essentials Reader. So how many of you had students last year in 3rd grade? Did any of you? Or another year in 3rd grade? Are you all pretty?
Oh, I've had 3rd grade.
Okay, at the Classical Academy?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, so before, we used to give what I would maybe say was a little ad hoc, as you referred to in that other picture, the visual earlier. We gave a lot of pieces. We gave you a handwriting practice book, and we gave you the spelling book, and we gave you the phonics program. One of the reasons we switched is because we knew the value of having a program that was completely integrated and how effective it could be to be reinforcing those concepts in the same philosophy, the same teaching strategies, all together in one piece. So I'm just going to go over a few more reasons why we chose Essentials. So some of the benefits of this program is that it's applicable to all students and all levels. There are 3 levels within the book. You probably noticed that, A, B, and C, and we'll talk about that a little more later. But this can be used to teach 2nd grade through really high school if necessary. It has some great foundational pieces that would fill in gaps for a lot of older students as well. It's a multi-sensory approach, so research has shown that we learn primarily through visual, auditory, and kinesthetic inputs. So when we're doing something using all 3 or more than 1 at least, we know that we're cementing those concepts even more by providing more opportunities for input. So when we're in this program where we're doing something like handwriting, where we are writing the letter, we're seeing it and we're saying it at the same time, or when the students are writing out their phonograms and saying them at the same time, sounding out the words, we're cementing that information through 3 different inputs. And some students have tendencies to be stronger in visual learning or in auditory learning or in kinesthetic. So we're also teaching to all learners besides providing all of those ways that their brain is receiving that information. It develops critical thinking skills. So as your student gets through the routine of memorizing the phonograms and the routine of going through spelling analysis, they're learning these thinking routines, these thinking skills that they can apply when they come to a word they don't know. So some of your students entering into this might already feel like they already know the words. They don't need to practice the spelling because they know how to spell all of these things. They don't need to practice the sounds, but you're actually teaching your student thinking routines that they can use when they don't know something. So it's really important to not just skip over those pieces because they seem easy. You're teaching students a strategy even though it may seem simple at this point. It's a comprehensive curriculum, which is what I mentioned before, and it really does prevent gaps in knowledge when it's all meant to work together versus curriculums that are pulled from different philosophies and strategies. And you'll see in a moment, I'm going to go through the components of a lesson, and you'll see how all of these pieces, the spelling, the grammar, the handwriting, work together in this program. It's logical and systematic, and it promotes confident learners. So like I was saying before, with my own education, sometimes I was not confident with spelling because there were so many exceptions. Oh, that's an exception. I don't really know where that applies and where that doesn't. And this program really does promote confidence because there are hard and fast rules, and there are, learning the phonograms really does explain the pronunciation and the spelling of so many words. Almost all of them. So I'm going to go through the components of a lesson, and you have it in your handout as well. It's on the 2nd page. And I really just wanted you to see that there is a routine to how you go through this material and how you are touching and incorporating so many things at one time. So the first part, the lessons, for the year you go through lessons 1 through 15 this year. And each lesson is divided into 5 parts. So you're not doing 1 lesson a day, you're doing a part of a lesson a day. And as you started earlier in the year, you were doing pre-lessons that prepared you to start the program. And then you started doing parts of lessons. So you weren't doing complete sections of lessons, but you're getting into doing complete parts. So there's 5 parts in a lesson. The first part is always essential concepts. And this is where your student is learning the new phonograms for this lesson. They're getting their handwriting lesson in this program. So your student is only getting a new handwriting lesson in this first section. So it's like every 1.5 weeks or so, your student is learning some new letters that they can practice. They're going to be exploring sounds. So they're exploring relationships between sounds and symbols, things like schwa, things like syllables, multiple syllables, single syllable, vowels, those kinds of things. That linguistics part, the physical language, that's kind of what they're exploring in this section. Spelling rules will be introduced in this part of the lesson as well. Part 2, there's a heart there because they consider this the heart of the lesson. And this is where your student is learning their spelling analysis. They're actually getting that spelling list for that lesson. And they're going to be going through that spelling analysis routine. And then they're going to be practicing applying phonograms and spelling rules that they're learning as they go through those through that list. So it's heavily tied to the phonograms they're learning, which is really great. And then they're going to be using their spelling journal and entering and sorting those words into their spelling journal by sound. So we're going to be talking a little bit more about how to use this later. The next section is called Words in Context. And then section 3, they're usually reviewing the spelling words again through dictation and games. And the games, just a side note, are really effective for learning. I know it's really easy to see like optional game or game and just kind of, oh, it's a game, we'll play it later. But they're really effective for practicing the phonograms, which is really the heart of the program. And so I would take opportunities to play them whenever you can with your students. A lot of teachers who use them see gaps right away. If their students are practicing phonograms, they see gaps. If their student isn't remembering one or can't apply one, it usually shows up really fast in those games. And then it offers more engaging opportunities for practice. And then for grammar, they're learning their grammar lesson and they're actually going back to their spelling list again, and they're marking that spelling list for which parts of grammar those spelling words are. So if organizationally, I would probably mark the spelling list for that lesson because you'll be going back to it many times. But you'll see in the workbook, there's the spelling words. I'm sure you've seen this. So they do the first day, that section 2, the spelling analysis, they're writing them down here. And then section 3, on another day, they're going back and they're labeling the parts of speech. And then another day, they're going to be labeling them and conjugating them in plural tense. So they really continue to rework and reinforce those spelling words. And then there's dictation. So this is that piece where your students are actually able to apply their spelling words. I don't know if in the past you've had them do spelling lists for a week and then a spelling test. And then when it comes time to write, they don't transfer that spelling word. They're still spelling it wrong. So this is that opportunity for students to be using those spelling words within a phrase or within a sentence, and that cements the correct spelling of that word as they're using it. Number 4, words in action, part 4. They continue to practice spelling, so spelling. And then they get into vocabulary, the Greek and Latin roots, and the roots of words, and they also apply some of that to the spelling list as well. So they'll be analyzing those words for the Greek and Latin roots that may be in them. And then more dictation and composition at a sentence level. And then finally, there's check your understanding. So this is at the end of the lesson, and they're doing a little bit of review from the day before. They're doing a quick assessment of what they've learned that lesson. And then it's short on purpose so that you have time for additional practice and going back. And there's a really great section that I would encourage you to go back and read in the beginning of your teacher's manual on page 15 that just talks about the purpose for assessments and how to incorporate your student in that process. They even suggest you have your student correct themselves in their own work so they can see their mistakes. So it's a great little, just 2 pages, but it's just some information on some great ways to utilize assessments and how to move on from there effectively. And then, like I said, time for additional practice, which could be time for review. It could be, if your student is acing everything, it could be time to play some of those phonogram games. Okay, so I wanted to take you on a more practical tour of the curriculum. And I did ask you to bring your teacher's manual, so it's great that you have it. It's called the teacher's guide, actually, but we always call it the manual. And I just wanted to walk you through some of this because really all of the other pieces stem from here. So some of the pieces are easier to miss than others, but most of your directions are directed from here. So I wanted to start by drawing to your attention to a piece that they have in here often that's really easy to overlook, and it's a teacher tip. These teacher tips are in the margins of so many of the lessons, and they hold really valuable information. And I'm going to read one to you just so you can see the impact of something that would be so easy to miss. It's on page 59. And it's the teacher tip in the margins on that page, and it's the benefit of teaching all of the sounds of the phonogram. So this is twofold because this is great information for you. Okay? All of the sounds are readily available to read in any word. It prevents discouragement. Students who know only one sound are often discouraged when they try to read words in real books. It eliminates exceptions. Otherwise, 30 to 50% of words become exceptions. That's how we traditionally learn to spell. It's pretty crazy. Students develop a realistic understanding that English phonograms represent more than one sound. Students who learn only one are often frustrated and disappointed when they realize the language is more complex than they were originally told. It brings relief to struggling students who notice the discrepancies, and it provides students with information about which sound to try first, since the sounds are listed in order of frequency. So that last piece is really important. When you are teaching your students to memorize the phonograms, and there's a list of sounds in the back that each phonogram makes, it's really important that they memorize them in that order, because the way that they're written here is that the most commonly used sounds are first. And that's purposeful for that when they encounter a word that they haven't seen before, they're trying the most commonly used sound for that spelling first. And usually those first few will be the ones that are being used. So as you have your student memorize these phonograms, make sure that they're memorizing those sounds in the correct order. There's a purpose for that. And that's one of those little critical thinking pieces. They're applying what they know. Okay, it could be one of these sounds that I memorized, and they're applying that knowledge to the new words that they encounter. All right, so I wanted to touch on another page here, and it is, sorry I don't have it marked, but it's very helpful. Somewhere in the beginning. There's a lot of great information in the beginning of this book, by the way. I would recommend, if you are feeling overwhelmed or lost in any way, take some time, like skip a day of lessons and just go through the material. But this page 20, I wanted to show you. And there's a lot of, this is a symbols key to using the book. Is it correct? No. Is it not the same?
No, it's just different.
Oh, different version. Oh, interesting. It's not page 20? Okay. Yours is page 20?
Before, after,
It's before spelling markings, and it's after handwriting and teaching phonograms. Oh my God. It's a different version. Okay, well we will look into that.
Oh wait.
Did you find it?
Spelling symbols,
Yeah.
10.
Okay, so for you it's 10. Okay. Great, well that's easy. Okay. So I just wanted to walk you through this, and then we're going to do some practical application with these pieces. But I wanted you to see that this was here. Little things like this box on the top is the basic phonograms, and then when you see a bolded square that has a phonogram, that means it's one of the advanced phonograms. The green book, you'll see that in the margins of your lesson, and that indicates that it's time for you to use your workbook. There's usually a page number right in the lesson, but it's an easy visual to catch. And then the purple leaf, that indicates your spelling journal. So that's a time when you'll be using your spelling journal. And then even further, you'll see that letters written in capital should be read as letter names. So one of the parts of this philosophy is that you can certainly name the letters with your student, but as you're teaching them to spell and read, you really should be referring to them as their sounds and not necessarily their names. So it's a little bit of a shift. It's hard to get used to, but you may have noticed that this is scripted. This text, a lot of the lessons are scripted, which is incredibly helpful. And this is just telling you that sometimes the letters are referred to by their names, and this is when that happens. All right, so I'm going to actually jump ahead and have you look at this. So at the beginning, I told you there's 5 parts. At the beginning, this sort of tells you what's going to happen throughout this entire lesson in the different parts. So here it has at the top the phonograms your student is learning. And then below there's one more phonogram that's advanced, and that's just for level C. As I mentioned before, there's 3 different levels, and they try to color code those things so that it's as easy visually as possible, but just something to keep in mind. The spelling rules they're learning for this lesson are spelling rules 3, 21, and 31.1. In the spelling journal, the sound they'll be working on is oi. And just a side note about the spelling journal, the teacher's manual doesn't refer to any pages in the spelling journal, and I know that that makes it a little bit complicated to find pieces in there. There is a sound to spelling reference page at the beginning that has some page numbers next to it, so you could potentially look for the sound and then find that sound in the book using this reference page. But they do that purposefully because they're trying to instill research skills in your student, have your student find, look on the sound spelling reference page. So it's kind of like that dictionary practice or reference practice. But I know it can complicate things when you're in the heat of the moment. So just a side note on that. It's intentional. And then for vocabulary, it tells you what your students are learning. So in level A, it's the word time. They're going to be exploring that a little bit and some words associated with time. And then in the other levels, they're going to be talking about some suffixes and some roots in level C. You'll see here on the side, there's this materials box. And those are usually referred to in the lessons on Schoology. At the beginning, you would check this. And there's one for every section, which is helpful. So at the beginning of that lesson, you would check this materials box for what you need. And then here you'll see a reference to the spelling card. This means that's the spelling rule card that you'll use to this piece here. One of these. And we're going to talk about organization in just a little bit too. Yeah. And then you'll see this is part 1. And if you remember going through the lesson components, part 1 is where the handwriting is initially taught. And there's no teacher's manual for the handwriting book. So what you'll see is a red box that tells you where and which letters your student will be learning. So where to go in that handwriting book and which letters that your student will be learning. And then of course we're just using the cursive. So whenever there's a reference to manuscript or cursive, we're always just using the cursive version of all of these materials. There's also reference to the advanced phonogram here, and then there's more helpful teacher tips on the side. Yesterday, for example, we were going through this and a person had a question about something in here, and I was out of context and I wasn't sure I was going to read through the whole thing, and then another one said, oh, it's right there in that teacher tip on the side. So if you're in doubt, make sure you read the teacher tips on the side, because most of the time they're explaining something that you need to know. And then, let's see what else here. At the end of this section, and at the end of almost every section, you'll see directions for the Essentials Reader. So those page numbers are also on the assignment calendar for you to be helpful. All of the resources that you're sent to from here, those page numbers are on the assignment calendar and in Schoology. But just know that if you were just looking at these materials, you would know what you needed to do if you saw those pieces, the handwriting, this the Essentials Reader. And then just a side note about that, you might have noticed that it's a little bit self-paced as far as, because it will say things like do some of the handwriting and composition activities, or do some of the extracurricular activities here. So you just have to determine, which pieces do I want to do today? Which ones are we working on? But I would certainly encourage you to do the pre-lesson pieces when they're designated.
Mariana, that's what we just wanted to jump in and reiterate with the readers portion. Even though it's under the essentials assignments, that's actually the reading instruction that your students are getting. So we're doing reader's choice differently, but the actual only real reading instruction you're getting is through the essentials. So as many of those as you can hit, it's just going to really help.
Yep. And there are going to be conversations written into the reader's choice lessons that emphasize different parts, theme and other pieces, and there may be more skills lessons written into that reading portion, but most of what your student is getting is from here. And I incorporated it on the Essentials Logic of English in that folder because it is part of this and it does really stem from this. So it could have easily been put in the reading section as something that was required, but I just felt like it was just easier because all of that was together to put it in the same section as this. But it is your reading, even though it says optional, we would like you to do it. And then you'll see here, so building words, this is that foundational piece with the spelling analysis. You'll see here in the margins, it has those green books because it's referring you to the workbook pages. And again, those can vary depending on which level your student is at. So oftentimes in the lessons, you'll see all of the page numbers that could possibly be required listed, but depending on your student's level, you may be only using some of those. Most likely only some of those. And then on the following page, you see here the reference to the spelling journal and which sound your student will be working with. So they talk about that sound a little bit more, and then they have your student take those words from the spelling list and organize them and add them. Do you have any questions so far? Yes.
I just got my books. My daughter's in 2nd grade.
Okay.
So I was wondering, there is a spelling journal book?
Yes, there is a spelling journal book. It looks like this.
All right,
so if
I
you
get
don't
that.
have it, contact your teacher and see if you can get it, because it's really helpful in organizing the words that your students are learning. Any other questions?
I have a question, because my daughter and I both have a trouble, like at the end of a word, knowing if it's ending in ENT or ANT. Is there a spelling rule for that?
I'm sure there
I haven't
is.
dug around enough, but maybe you guys know.
Which lesson, or just in general?
Just in general.
I think there is, but I don't know it right off the top of my head. Anyone? You can always look it up too. That's what,
And I made a note, but I'm like, oh, just ask in the class.
no, it's okay. I was talking to this amazing teacher who works with homeschooling families downstairs, and she was just saying that there's so much value in hitting something like that with your student and saying, you know what, let's find out. Let's jump on the computer. We'll see what resources we can find to answer that question. So I don't have that question for you, the answer for you right now, but I am positive it's addressed in here, and I just haven't hit it yet.
It's probably going to be in the spelling rules. If you flip through the spelling rules.
Yeah.
In
I'm
book
sure.
C, there's like this cheat sheet, like fold out hard
There,
thing, and I use that all the time. I think it's like the most valuable resource. So I was wondering if they have something like that for this level.
They do, yep. Yep, so there are two other pieces
Everything
that
I always need to know is in that yellow
hopefully
one.
received, and it's a rhythm of handwriting quick reference. And then the phonogram and spelling rule quick reference sheet. So this has, what I really like about this, it has all of those spelling rules. So if we took a minute or two, we could probably find that rule pretty quickly. 288 as well, yeah. They have this in multiple locations. I think this is also in the beginning of your teacher's manual as well. But what I do like is that there are some videos that show her actually practicing spelling analysis with students on Schoology lessons, and we're going to send those resources to you. But I love how it has the prompts for each of those phonograms. So when you're learning a phonogram like edit, and it says the past tense ending, there's these verbal prompts that are helpful for your student as you learn the phonogram. So like when she refers to talk K, she says talk, and that's a prompt that helps your student. And so those kinds of prompts are in here for you, and they're in your books as well. They're in your phonogram cards as well.
And they're
So
also used in the assessments when you're doing the phonemes or phonograms.
Yeah.
In their assessments, it comes up.
Yeah, it's so nice that it's all scripted for you, because then you start to, if you don't know yet, you can start to memorize those prompts that are helpful for your student as they're going through. Absolutely. All right, so let's go move on in that lesson. Part 3 to 11 is the page number for me. Again, so I mentioned before that it'd be helpful to mark your spelling list with a tab, because you do continue to go back to it. So both in your workbook and in your teacher's manual, it might be helpful to mark that spelling list for the lesson. And then I just wanted to go over some things quickly. So this section here, when you see these 3 colors in a lesson, those are your answer keys. So for this lesson, they're asking your student to identify the nouns in that spelling list. And this is the answer key for each of those levels. So if your student's doing spelling list B, those are the nouns from that spelling list. C, those are the nouns from that spelling list. And you'll see here some of these were in parentheses. For B, this is what we were talking about yesterday. So in B, some of those words were in parentheses. And if you look at that teacher's tip, it's telling you the reason there's parentheses around that word is because that's not as commonly identified as a noun. So your student may not realize that that's a noun, Maybe it's something, and one of the words yesterday we saw was royal, because that was in parentheses because it can be a noun, but really in pop culture, kids aren't usually talking about royals as nouns.
Right.
It's usually an adjective. So there's little nuances in the curriculum like that I think are really explain a lot when you're wondering what is going on. And further on, you'll see more references to spelling rules. So I just wanted you to know that there's all of this helpful information on the side, and then these visual aids, like the little icons that indicate where you need to go in the curriculum. In case you're wondering, these numbers on the side are parts of the lesson. I think you've been following those probably if you were doing the earlier lessons in Unit 2, because you were doing parts like section 4.3 to 4.7 or something. And then this little box that says all, that just means that this part of the lesson is for all the students, not specific levels. So it's just a distinction for you. Whenever it says all, that means all the students are doing this, and then they separate. So if you're teaching multiple students, it's really helpful to know which pieces are for everyone and which pieces would be more specific. All right. Any other questions at this point about navigating? Okay, I'm gonna go a little bit more into some of the pieces. So again, the handwriting is only taught in one part per lesson, and then it's continued to be reinforced throughout all the lessons. You probably noticed in the workbook, there's copy work that's in cursive writing that your student does. And then even in the reader, there's some copy work, the reader workbook, there's some copy work in cursive that your student does. But I wanted to draw your attention to a couple of things in here, and feel free to tab it if you want. At the beginning of this rhythm of handwriting, oh, you don't have your book, sorry. You can mark it down if you want. There are ideas for handwriting practice. So depending on where your student is, they may be just getting through the handwriting right now, or you may feel like they really do need more practice with their handwriting. And there are some great ideas for how you can practice handwriting with your student here. More engaging games and things like that, all different ways. So there's 2 pages, skywriting, letter stations, blind writing, all kinds of different activities. So I'd encourage you to go back there if you feel like your student needs additional help. And then in our Essentials resource page, which I'm going to show you quickly, that's going to be linked in each of the lessons starting in Unit 3. There's a PDF. There's a section linked to PDFs where you can actually download and print handwriting pages for your student if you would like them to practice more. And on that same note, just so you know, hopefully you know, that whenever your student is practicing handwriting, they're not expected to fill in these complete pages. They're actually expected to choose which size of the lines are most comfortable for them and just complete those lines. So hopefully you were completing, I did hear some parents were having their students complete all of these every single time. And at the beginning of the year, that was probably really a lot for your student. But just know they're only expected to really decide which size works best for them, and then you can offer them additional practice with those pages that are available to you, if you like. And then again, hopefully they're using their cursive throughout the other parts of the lessons as they're writing for dictation and those other pieces.
Do you have suggestions for making that transition? Because my son will do the cursive in the book, but when he writes in other parts, it is yeah.
I would sprinkle it in, like just start with some pieces, and then like maybe you could just have him write his spelling analysis list, or maybe say, okay, today you're going to do 5 words in cursive from our spelling list. Let's just do 5. There's a really great, in IEW, the writing program that we use, there's a really great rule called easy +1. And all it means is that you are teaching your student until it becomes easy, and then you're adding one more thing. And then you're adding one more thing. And there was a great question yesterday from a parent who said, well, I feel like my student might be struggling the levels. Like maybe right now they're in B, but they could maybe be challenged a little more, but I'm not sure if they can do all of that C level work. And that's what I had said, is that you could really, if you wanted to start challenging your student more, feel like they're capable, you could sprinkle in like one of those words from level C or one of those activities and see how it works. But Easy Plus One is a really great rule book. And then another piece.
I was just going to add that 2 other suggestions for the cursive, depending on your students. The erasable pens. It's the actual writing that it takes on the hand is easier. And also, if they even do just a piece in the workbook and then give them that space on their whiteboards, the flow is much easier, and you find, depending on your students, they might enjoy it a little bit more and be more willing to practice the flow.
And the pens did make a huge difference because you suggested in the beginning of the year, and that did take us to a better level.
Yeah, absolutely. There's Andrew Pudua, also from our writing program. He's the creator of our writing program. But he suggests that students, it really is challenging for students to use pencil because their tactile experience is constantly changing. So first it's sharp and then it gets dull. And I don't know about you, but when I was teaching, I struggled with allowing students to continue to sharpen their pencils over and over again. It really can just be distracting anyway. But students can really struggle with that changing tactile experience. So it is really great for them to write with pen, and erasable pen even better. So someone had suggested yesterday erasable gel pens, and she said they were amazing. We should have kept one, right? So we could see which brand it was, but she said they erased really well because some of those erasable pens aren't as great as others. So I would recommend that for practicing cursive as well. Let's see what else here. Any other, so I'm going to move on to organization. Does that sound good to everyone? All right, so as you're going through some of these, there are some pieces that you can sort of set aside immediately. So we know you got all of your materials at the beginning of the year. You got these books, which you're not using until after Unit 3 is over, and these cards are indicating that as well. So you can certainly set these aside organizationally, just put them away for now. And my daughter isn't quite ready for foundation. She's almost 5, but I've been practicing the phonograms with her. So some of the things that I do to keep our organized according to, what we're using currently and what we're not using is a lot of rubber bands. So I brought extra rubber bands. If you'd like to take some with you today, feel free. So I usually just wrap the ones that we're using. I take out the ones that we're practicing currently, and then when we're done, I just attach them back to the larger pile. I do keep all of my cards in a shoebox. I know Coastal was amazing and they gave you a baggie too, so you can certainly keep them all in a large baggie. For me, I just use a shoebox. You could use a plastic bin, that's shoe size. The morphing cards, you probably noticed this, but they're color coded according to your student's level. So you can automatically just take out, if your student is level B, take out those green ones. And then this, like I said, lots of rubber bands. This is a pile within a pile. So this is the one, these are the ones your student would be doing through lesson 4. And then you can just add them back in and put them in your box. For the game cards, I know there's some reading specialists who use a lot of these games, and they keep, the cards that we're using right now, the phonograms we've covered so far, and the ones that we're not using in 2 separate baggies. So those are just some quick little organizational pieces that hopefully are helpful. For these game tiles, I know they're a little trickier. So there's a teacher on another campus who plays games. She teaches only essentials. It's a separate class, and she organizes them this way, and she feels like that's helpful visually. So I kind of put my own method together, and I just have my single letter phonograms here. These are the vowels, and then I have, as I introduce more, I'll probably shift them all into one section where they're just the ones that we're learning. But it's helpful because there are some longer ones, like as you get further in. This is just a bead organizer from Walmart, but when you choose a container, you have to find one that has all different sizes of squares to fit all of these different ones. So just a little more visual, or you can use the baggies and separate them and do that. What else?
Mariana,
Yes.
this might be a great time to show them that scope and sequence where if
Yep.
they're ever
Thank you.
curious what cards
Yep.
to add or to do.
So if for some reason you haven't been separating them so far, and you're like, well, where would I even start if I haven't been doing this yet? Which ones have we covered so far? Or just in any moment when you're lost and you're like, wait, which ones are we doing right now? The scope and sequence, in my book, let's see, this book, it's page 40. I think this should be correct to your page. This is actually incredibly helpful. It will tell you in that first column, it's showing you the phonograms your student has learned so far. So this whole first column here, in lesson 1 it was A through Z. It's really tiny, but it's right there. Those are the phonograms. And then as you go down, you can see the cards. This is referring to the cards that your student is currently working on. Those bolded ones are the advanced phonograms, so you would know to pull those advanced phonograms out. In some cases, those are only for level C. That's the only place they don't differentiate right here. So you know for sure you'd be doing all of those phonograms and then possibly that bolded one. And then the next column has exploring sounds, and you can see that, but then those green numbers, those are your spelling rules cards. So if your student if you're not sure which ones you're working on in a current lesson or what you've done before, that would tell you right there which ones you could pull out and have in that pile of what we're working on right now. And then the spelling journal, spelling journal right here. It shows you the sounds that your student has explored already in your spelling journal. So they've already found some words that they can categorize by those sounds. And then those numbers that are purple, those are your grammar cards, your spelling grammar cards. So when I put the lessons in Schoology, I usually try to make those green or purple along with the color coding that they use in the program. And I'll talk about that. Yeah, I'm going to talk about that in a second.
Yeah, I was just going to mention on this, it's great for going back and reviewing, but it's also a really easy place to prep for your coming unit.
Yep.
Your materials, it is stated each lesson and it is stated in Schoology, but sometimes that can be overwhelming. That this is one place where you can, before you even start the unit, gather what you're going to need for that.
Yeah, add those cards to your pile because you know you're going to be using them absolutely. And then further over, you'll see these resources and information is organized by level. So if your student is level C, they'll be working on all of these morpheme cards that you would be pulling. And if they're working in level B, it would be these cards here. Yeah, so it's just if you are lost at any point, like, oh wait, do I have all of the right cards out right now? Instead of flipping back through all the lessons, if you feel like you're missing one or something, it's really a quick reference, it's helpful. And then just a word about that. So Schoology can be really great and helpful, and it gives us opportunities to share things like videos with you about the lessons and maybe some helpful tips. But what I would recommend if you're feeling overwhelmed with jumping into those lessons every time and seeing what you need to do is really just looking at that box on the assignment calendar that says these pages, these materials, and that would really be all you need unless you would like additional information. So I do have really helpful videos in there, but those can certainly be something that you look at if you're feeling like you need more help. Don't feel obligated to go in every single time. If you feel like you have a good flow, just look at that little box. Or even if you just feel like you need to focus and you can't take the visual piece of Schoology, just look at that little box in the assignment calendar and work from there. Because I know, we try to offer a lot of supports really just like them, right? They have all of these great supports, but visually it can kind of hit you in the face and it's hard to focus on any one thing. We tend to do the same thing sometimes in Schoology. So you certainly feel free to only use the assignments from the assignment calendar, and then if you feel like you would like something more or you're missing something, you could jump in. Just to give you a little relief there. Thank you, No. Are there any other questions at this point? Okay.
I have a question real fast.
Yeah.
When it comes to level A, B, and C,
Yes.
Does it matter what level you're teaching at for 3rd grade?
So for 3rd grade, there was actually a placement test at the beginning of the year.
Yeah.
For any grade, really, jumping into the program, you'd want to start with the placement test. So the way that you said your student's doing 2nd grade, so sounds like you're doing something a little bit modified.
Yeah, we're in book C.
Okay.
And she knows, all her sounds and what.
Yeah.
I mean, all this we've kind of seen before.
Yeah.
So I don't know, should we be working at a certain level, or should we repeat it again next year? Should we not go all the way and maybe go all the way next year?
I would say continue to let her work through if you can. Like I was saying earlier, it's easy to say, oh, they just know that word. Let's just let them move on. But I would really want you to make sure that your student is is picking up on that thinking routine of really working through the spelling analysis. When we don't know a word, let's count the syllables. There are different steps that your student is taught to do when they're encountering a new word, and that is really helpful regardless of whether the word is very easy or not. The strategy is still really helpful. You could certainly work through it at an accelerated pace if you feel like it's, we don't need to live here for so long, we can move on. And then there are also, at the end of every lesson, at least, I don't know if you're following what I'm doing on Schoology or not, but
No, not you.
there's a resource available that I attach at the end of every lesson in part 5, and it's a progress monitor checklist, and it's basically what your student is supposed to know by the end of that lesson. It's attached as a PDF and you download it, and it actually distinguishes between some of the things your student is currently working on, like they're not expected to master that right now, but then there are things that your student is expected to master. So you could go through that. However, my only concern would be that it doesn't always include spelling rules or grammar pieces in there. It's more having to do with exploring the sounds, and so you could potentially miss some of those important things if you skip ahead. So I would say easy +1. If it's easy, maybe add a little more or go a little more quickly through, maybe continue into the next part of the day's work, the next day's work a little bit, and see if you can go through more quickly. But it really just depends on your student. I would just be concerned about skipping a bunch. But does that help you at all?
Yeah, I was just wondering if, what level I should work her at.
Well, if she's tested, did you do the placement test?
Well, I did the Logic of English online.
Okay, which I think is the same.
I hope so, because I was telling Miss Brinson, I go, hey, we did all this, and we're gonna be ready for the next book after C. She goes, oh, then you should do this.
Are you doing Foundations level C? Or
yes.
Oh, okay. So that's a little bit different.
Yeah, so that's,
okay.
I thought we're gonna go.
Are you talking about jumping into Essentials then possibly?
Yeah.
I see. Okay. So Foundations C. Let's see. I think Foundations D is very similar to level A in this book. Okay. So I would take the placement test for this book if that's what you're considering. It's at the beginning.
Okay.
And what it would do, you're really getting, they would still benefit from staying in Foundations and just maybe accelerating.
Well, she's doing it in class and that's fine, but
okay.
Just at home, because she memorizes everything. So
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, there's a placement test at the beginning. I would recommend you could take that with your student, and then there's actually if they're missing some pieces and you're determined to jump in here, the pre-lessons are meant to cover what your student doesn't. If your student has some shortcomings in the placement test, the pre-lessons are supposed to prepare them. Does that make sense?
All right. Yeah,
so the placement test was originally made to see which pre-lessons your student needed before beginning the program. But in consulting with LOE, when I started pacing the program for our new parents coming into this from nowhere, we decided it was better just to go through all of the pre-lessons. So if you're coming from knowledge of Foundations and experience with that, you could certainly take the placement test, determine which pre-lessons your student needs to take, and that will also help you determine the level your student's working in. So, okay. So a little bit of a different scenario.
Yes.
Okay. No, that's okay. Any other questions? Anything I missed?
Can you show on Schoology, so currently in our Schoology calendar for Unit 3, if you do want more resources or videos to watch, where's the easiest place?
I have that in the next. I'm going to jump through this real quick and then I got a little
happy jump through
fun conversation. Okay, so I'm going to go over this quickly. We've sort of been sprinkling this in as we've been talking, but some tips. So definitely practice all the phonograms every day. Like I said, order is important. So make sure your student is reciting the order, the sounds of the phonograms in the correct order. Organization is certainly helpful, especially in a program with so many pieces. There are helpful videos and resources embedded in the lessons where they're appropriate. So for example, lesson 4, your student is learning about the schwa sound. I think that's supposed to be tomorrow's lesson for you, if you're in V-Track. There's a video underneath that explains that a little bit more. But really the lessons themselves are also very self-explanatory. So that's an extra piece if you would like her to talk about that, if you'd like to see Denise Ide talk about that. An opportunity to play a game. So it will have 4 phonograms and then it will play Is it just LOE? That's what I was trying to show you. So we'll show your student, yeah, it's LOE.
Okay.
Logic of English. It shows your student 4 phonograms and then says the sounds for one of them, and your student has to determine which one that is. So that's like a little game they can play. And then this is, I think, the most helpful piece, just as a quick reference for you. If you want to hear the phonograms like on that chart, you can just
A, 2-letter A that may be used at the end of English words.
So that has that prompt that I was talking about. That helps your student distinguish
J,
between them.
hard J, used only after a single short vowel.
So it's just helpful if you're not certain about different sounds. Has anyone used the video that goes through A through Z phonograms?
I've only used it individually.
Okay. There's a video in earlier lessons that goes through all of the phonograms A through Z, which could certainly be helpful. She just sits and like shows the card. But I would just remind you that you do want your student to learn the phonograms in all different orders. So that's why I was touching on that. Because some students learn only in that order and then they aren't making the right connections and they don't remember the phonograms if they're out of order. So just a side note. But there are videos connected to the Schoology lessons, and then there's actually a YouTube site called logicofenglish.com. They have their own channel, and you can find a ton of information there. And that's going to take me to my next piece here.
Can I say something about the app?
Yes.
There's a game in there and you can choose the level and your kid can play it if you want them to have extra.
Yep, and they actually
practice.
progress through the level
Yeah.
and they get more difficult. Yep, absolutely. Thank you for sharing.
Which is a great reward after you finish the scripted part with
Yeah,
them.
right.
Hang in there for the scripted part and then you get the LOE.
Yeah, and I will
Like brain pop for English.
carry up some really fun
On most videos, because I know people that did this from the earlier grades, like we're just starting in 3rd grade.
Yeah.
They said that, like in kindergarten, there were great videos with like the hand movements and like
So-
all
The
of
finger
that.
spelling?
Yeah.
Yes, so there were some hand movements. I haven't incorporated them as of yet, but one of the amazing teachers here at Coastal has created memorization hand movements. And the only reason, the only reason I haven't up to now is just because of my feedback about how often video resources are used anyway. I just didn't know how much parents would actually be using those, to be honest.
Okay.
I can certainly incorporate those and have those on as part of the resource page. Go ahead.
We had those linked, so let me just show really quick.
Yeah,
for my
go for it.
class, it was an LOE need to know folder.
Okay.
We just have an internal, we need to get permission again to her folder of all those videos. We had it at the beginning of the year, Unit 1, and sometime in between it just linked. So we'll reestablish that, but you can see it, it will show up, and we'll just move it into the unit, each unit. The LOE need to know, and those are the internal videos that the 1st grade teachers have created. But up here, in Logic of English, you'll find the Essentials resource page. If you click on that, that's an awesome tool that Mariana has created that has all the different links to a wide variety of video support, spelling rules, and she's kind of goes through this with me now.
Yeah, exactly. I'll just put them out real quick and then I want to. So the teacher training course, this is actually a collection of videos that they've created to teach teachers, but also parents. A lot of parents attend the teacher training course if they feel like they need a little more support. What's great about that section is if you go to it, this links directly to their page. And what I think is especially helpful is that it's separated by topic and actually mostly goes through the information you need in the order that you're learning it as you start the program. So the videos that are appropriate, I've actually linked in the lessons, but if you feel like you need to jump back and you want to check something out, you can see here, this is a helpful one, handwriting instruction. So Denise Ives herself is the one who's talking in all of these, and she goes through the purpose of saying and giving your students directions like loop and baseline, and just kind of makes you feel a little more confident, I think, in my opinion. And then this video goes over the A through C phonograms, consonants, vowels. So very topical, which is really helpful. You can jump in and look for something that you need and find it there. Is it this one? Sorry. So sorry.
I can, here,
You just stay here. I'm sorry.
it's okay.
I'm really bad at navigating in front of everyone. As we get back to that page, I wanted to just read.
PowerPoint
Yeah.
is right, okay.
Well, that essentials page, I guess.
Yeah, I closed out.
Oh, did I close?
Yeah, do you need it?
No, it's okay.
Okay.
So just know that there are a lot of helpful videos on that page. And actually, we're going to send a follow-up email to you with pointing out maybe the 3 most helpful ones about handwriting and spelling analysis and spelling dictation. Finger spelling, which I don't know if you've tried that yet.
Is that where you're like, if the phoneme has 2 letters, you do, yes.
So for my, it would be I, T.
Qua would be the,
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Yeah.
And in the video, it explains that a little bit more, which is helpful, why we do that. But I wanted to encourage you because I know one thing that's amazing about these is the scripted lessons, but it can feel awkward, but just do it. Even though it feels awkward, that's exactly what a lot of teachers do, especially when they're learning a new program. There's scripts in teachers' manuals, and they've really worked hard to write every single thing down. And I would just encourage you to sit across from your student and have the book in front of you. And you might need to say something like, okay, well, I'm the teacher today, and you're my student. I'm going to teach you just like your teacher does in the classroom. And you go through and just read through this lesson with them. And I guarantee it will feel more natural the more that you do it. I just wanted to say that because I think sometimes we read it and we're like, okay, now I have to figure out how to make that in my own words, or, you know, what can I summarize from that and tell my student? But really, there's so much in here in these lessons that I would really encourage you to just sit down and, you know.
It makes it easy. for me.
It really
I just
does,
like,
yeah.
Okay, here we go, no problem.
Yeah.
You know?
Tell me the vowels, you know, and you have the answer right here, right? You don't really need to guess at this, or in these moments you're not learning with your student, you have it all in front of you, right? The other note I wanted to hit on is if you are for some reason feeling behind or lost, or I know this has been sort of a deep jump for everyone this year, it's really new. Like I said, it's different from what you've ever learned before. Give yourself some flexibility to just, you know, take a day, go through the curriculum again, especially after something like today where maybe some aha moments are happening, and kind of look through it. If you feel like you're lost and you're rushing ahead and you're not sure what's going on, feel free to go back. Okay, let's start at lesson 1 again. What's going on here? And then work through that with your student and see how comfortable they are and continue to move on from there. Even if you only get through 8 lessons this year, your student is going to make huge strides. I know with my daughter, just teaching her some of the phonograms was amazing. And she already forgot because she's young, but the day that we were practicing them a lot, she started recognizing sounds everywhere. And doing that more and more, that's one huge shift that is just going to change so much, even just that one little piece. But if you don't get through all 15 lessons, of course we would like you to, and we think that's great. You know, it covers all of the 3rd grade standards if you do. To give yourself a little bit of wiggle room. This is the first year with this program. You've never had it before, and just be flexible with yourself and with your student. Don't feel like you're treading water. You know, let's do it well. Let's jump back. If we need to go back, let's go through these again and do them really well and understand what's happening. So just to give yourself a little break, and so you can take, you know, not feel overwhelmed, like I'm falling behind, what's happening. The beauty of the pacing for 3rd grade is that it's not so tied to what's happening in the classroom. In the classroom, they're doing the reviews, they're practicing phonograms, the spelling rules, the grammar rules with your student. If they haven't had it yet, it's just preview. If they've already had it and they're working ahead, it's just review. So you really have the freedom to make the pacing work for you. We have an idea of how we think it will be helpful on Schoology, but certainly you know your student and what your student needs. So I would feel some freedom in that. You're the primary educator of your student, and you have that. You know, you can make that decision for your student. Of course, you know, with the help of your teachers. And so just feel, you know, we want this to be really successful for your student. We really know that there are amazing outcomes for students who do use this program. And we're excited about the results that we see and the results that you'll be able to see in your students as you move forward. So, any other questions?